And to take a closer look at the power play for Fairfax, I'm joined in our Sydney studio by fund manager Roger Montgomery. Roger, thanks for being there.
It's a pleasure, Tiggy.
Now, as a long-suffering passive investor, not as one of these players, how should one be viewing Fairfax?
Look, Fairfax has been a difficult business for a number of reasons. So let me take you through some numbers. This is a business that has generated $3.2 billion of cash flow from its operations over the last 10 years. But it's invested $3.6 billion in acquisitions and in itself, and it's also paid about $1.3 billion in dividends. So it's left with a gap, a funding gap, of about $1.7 or $1.8 billion. Now, the only way it can actually fill that gap is by borrowing money, which it has done, or raising additional equity. And so its equity has gone up from $1.1 billion to over $4 billion over 10 years. And that's diluted shareholders, and it's also diluted the return on equity of the business. So the return on equity has fallen precipitously, and the share price over long periods of time tends to follow the performance of the business. So the share price in 2007 was around $5 a share. It's now a tenth of that. And more importantly, intrinsic value has been declining since 2004 and shows no signs of improving.
So is Gina Rinehart right then when she criticises the current chairmanship as presiding over an approximate 60% loss in share market value and loss of circulation and loss of, in the major mastheads as well?
Well, let me make a couple of points. You can make a few $1 million, and you don't have to be very intelligent to do that. And I think there's plenty of people in the finance industry that are living testament to that. But you can't make billions of dollars and not be intelligent. So Gina knows what she's doing. She knows the performance of this business has been bad. Whether it should be laid at Roger Corbett's lap, I don't know. I think the economics of this business are the same as the economics of newspaper businesses around the world, and many of them are shutting down.
So does she, let's assume that Mrs. Rinehart has taken now, a 15% stake. Does that mean that she deserves a position on the board at this stage?
Look, typically in this situation, she is the largest shareholder now in the company, and 15% is more than enough to warrant a board seat. But the board needs to take into account, remember, the board's working for the shareholders. They're supposed to be representing all shareholders, not any particular vested interest. But it is right for a 15% shareholder to be protecting their own interests by asking for a board seat. So it's interesting that they appear to have snubbed her in this case.
Well, I think you're quite right. That was one of the interesting things, that Roger Corbett did actually have a vacancy very recently. But not only did he not give it to Gina Rinehart or a nominee, but he actually gave it to former Ernst & Young James Miller, who was not necessarily the obvious choice. I mean, I think there could have been many other stronger candidates, and even the 9% fund manager Alan Gray's chief said, "I share the sense of frustration that the board, have gone and appointed what appears to be a mate of theirs." I mean, that would have been a major snub, wouldn't it?
Yes, I believe so. And let's remember this, these things are usually won through a war of attrition. And we've just seen it with James Packer and Echo, for example. And over time, I think Gina will actually get the seat that she wants. And we have to remember this is small change for a woman who has potentially $20 to $40 billion in personal wealth. And really, we're talking about a $200 million investment.
But Roger, can I interrupt just briefly?
Sure.
What value do you think that she will add? I mean, we know she wants a greater voice, but what value will she bring to Fairfax?
Well, I suspect she's a very hard-nosed businesswoman, and she will make the tough decisions that perhaps haven't been made so far. But remember, this is 1% of her total wealth. It's like someone with $100,000 of savings buying a plasma television. The war of attrition will be won by Gina in the long run.
Roger Montgomery, thank you very much for joining us.
It's a pleasure.